Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Kathleen Wong and I'm from TGO Consulting, and I'm pleased to have Griffin Swanson here with me today. He is the inside sales rep for Professional Advantage, which is one of our GP partners. So he's here today to show you how you can improve your system performance, streamline your database, and increase performance and more with Professional Advantage. So before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. All your phones are going to be on mute so we can reduce any background noise, but if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar interface and we'll be answering them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so for the next 45 minutes, we'll introduce who we are, TGO and Professional Advantage, go through the demo of the company data archive module, then answer any questions that you may have at the end. So for those of you who don't know who TGO is, we have been implementing financial systems for the past 27 years, focused on the office of the CFO. We specialize in ERP, business intelligence, business process management, and corporate performance management. In the ERP space, we have been a GP partner since 1994. We guarantee the success of all our projects at a fixed price. And we're always looking for ways to help our clients enhance their system and at the end of the day, improve their bottom line with solutions like Professional Advantage. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Griffin.
Thank you, Kathleen. As she stated, just want to go through a few PowerPoint slides today, and then we'll spend most of the time in GP demoing Company Data Archive. Again, feel free to ask any questions during today's webinar in the webinar questions area. I also have Matt Green, our product manager, on as well today, who will help answer some of those questions at the end. So first off, I'd like just to start by explaining who Professional Advantage is. We were established in 1989. We've been a Microsoft President's Club member for several years, and we have 12 offices worldwide. Originally out of Australia, we moved to the Philippines, the UK, and here in North America. So today I want to cover the main benefits of archiving and what the product can deliver. But first, I'd like to give a brief history of the product. Databases. We've seen it used on a wide variety of database sizes. We have some customers that are using it who have 1 to 2 gigabytes of data, all the way up to extremely large customers who have 400 to 500 gigabytes of data. Some of the benefits of archiving. First, the main benefit, first and foremost, it's going to streamline your database. So that's going to reduce the clutter and the inquiries and reports that you have in GP. And as you know, you can put a lot of date ranges on those reports, but you can still end up with a lot of noise that's going to restrict your users from viewing the useful data. So Company Data Archive gets rid of that clutter, it streamlines your database, and allows your users to make faster and better decisions. Now, hand in hand with streamlining data, Company Data Archive will increase processing performance. Specifically, you'll see the performance improvement of lookups, reports, inquiries, and smart lists in GP. If you think about it from a SQL perspective, if that's scanning through millions on millions of rows from temporary tables it generates, that's going to take some extra time. For example, let's say Company Data Archive takes a table with 4 million rows. It would cut that down to about half the rows, for about 2 million, and then you'd see performance improvements in GP after that archive. The next benefit with CDA is faster upgrades. If you have a large database with your live company, that would take some time to upgrade. However, if you archive before an upgrade, in turn shrinking your live database, the upgrade would go faster, really leaving you the option to upgrade your historical database on your leisure or downtime. And then the last point here, optimizing disk space. As the database gets bigger, it takes up more disk space, and that takes SQL longer and longer to run the backup and restore processes. So Company Data Archive will shrink the live database, taking up less disk space. And then we've seen companies move their archive database onto different drives that are running on less optimal hardware, leaving their live company to their higher performing hardware. So now we'll actually go into GP and demo the product. I do want to note that I am in my archive company. You can see that here in the bottom left. And that's just another standard company in GP. Users can access this data like they would any other company and run similar reports, inquiries, smart lists, just like they would in a live company. Now, we typically see a customer keep 2 to 3 years of data in their live company, and then they'll move everything else into their archive company during their initial archive. The great thing about our product is that you can keep adding to that same archive company over time. So after that initial archive, companies will run an annual, a semi-annual, or even a month archive, and then that way they have their historical data in one spot. Now the tool's logic is broken down into 2 pieces worth mentioning. One, it only allows you to archive historical or fully applied data. And 2, all related documents in the apply chain must fall after your cutoff date for those to be archived. So let's take a look at some of the windows here. First, I want to show you a few database maintenance features that come with the product. And the first one I'll show you is our company data archive pre and post archive tool. So if we process this, what it does is it goes through and it runs a report on SQL index fragmentation. So you can see here that some need to be rebuilt and some need to be reorganized. So what we've done is allow, based on that report, it will generate an email. So this email here, this will contain Microsoft recommended SQL script to optimize those indexes. You can copy and paste this script into SQL Management Studio and run that. Or if it's somebody else in your organization, you could forward them the email and have them execute the script. So the reason we call it pre and post archive tool is because we recommend running it pre-archive for your best archive performance and then running it again post-archive for your best daily operation performance, since you're likely going to be changing the content of your database quite drastically after you do that process. Now the next window I want to show you here is our SQL and Dynamics GP diagnostics. So if we click Mark All and we process that, you can select, we built in this SQL and Dynamics GP diagnostics, but please note this is purely informational. It's not going to repair anything for you in your database. So you can select any of these diagnostics and run it for your database. And it's going to tell you based on what it's looking for whether your database meets Microsoft recommendation, if it needs to be determined, or if it does not meet the recommendation. And then you can click into each of these diagnostics, and it's going to review the description, and then it's going to show you your database results. And then we've also included Microsoft documentation here at the bottom, and that's just so you have quick access for more details. Now one other window I want to show you here before we get into the actual archive process is the data distribution and sizes. So if we click calculate for that, this is going to be a report of your database and how the data is distributed between the years you've been on GP. And then each year will have a disk space amount. You can break down each year into a specific module. And then you can break down each module showing the row count of actual tables that our product will archive. Now this data can be exported into an Excel file, and I actually have some customer data that I'll show you. So as you can see, this customer's data was growing exponentially by year, and it made sense for them to archive general ledger, receivables management, SOP, and maybe some inventory. So the product lets you choose which modules you want to archive and their cutoff dates. So for example, if you wanted to keep 5 years of general ledger, but you only wanted to keep 3 years of receivables data, you can slice it that way, and our product really gives you a lot of flexibility there. But now we'll take a look at our actual archive window. So running this process and kicking it off is pretty straightforward. I'll run through the fields, and then I have one more feature that I'll show you after. But starting at the top here with our destination company, this is going to be your archive company which you set up and where your data will be going. Your originating company, you look up into that. This is going to be your live company where your data is actually coming from. So you'll specify your archive date. So everything previous to that date is then subject to archive as long as it's in the history tables. You can choose to archive by the document date or the GL posting date. We see most companies use the GL posting date, but if you go off of more of a calendar date, some companies will use the document date. The GL posting date is for companies that are GL-centric and are posting in their fiscal period. There is a print reports option here that gets reports of the data that came across, reports of data that did not come across, or perhaps wasn't fully applied. We have some core GP modules here that archive, and then there is a transfer and remove column here that essentially gives us 3 options when running this process. The first and by far the most common practice is to have both columns selected. It's the most general sense of archiving. What you're doing is you're removing it from your live company and placing into your archive company. The second option would be to run a transfer only. So that's just making a copy of the data from your live company into your archive company. You might be wondering why anybody would want to do that. Sometimes we'll see some of our customers do this first. They'll go into the archive company, see what's been copied across from the live, look around to see if they're satisfied with everything that has been brought across, and then they'll come back in here and do a transfer and remove, and that just effectively verifies that first it's been transferred, they can see that it's in the archive company, and then it just deletes it from the live. Now the third option would be to run a remove only. The way we have it set up by default is it doesn't allow anyone to do that, and that's just for obvious reasons. You know, you don't want anyone going in there and just deleting data. But in your registration window here, there is a setup option. This checkbox here allows you to remove without transferring. Essentially just allow you to enable that remove only option. Now while we're in here, I do want to show you a few more setup options. You can set a minimum cutoff date here. So if you know you don't want anything touched or archived in your most current 2 or 3 years, you can set that minimum here. I also do want to highlight that the archive process can be paused and resumed. And we also recommend running that process during your off-peak business hours. So we'll recommend that your users are out of GP during the archive process. So if, for example, you start the archive tonight after work, you let that process run overnight, and you return tomorrow that the process hasn't finished yet, you can pause that archive, allow your users to resume their regular GP activity, and then resume the archive later tomorrow evening, or you can run it on the weekend. There's also a configuration here that allows you to change the block size of your customers or vendors per SQL transaction. Now 2 things to note. Number 1, the larger the block size, the faster your archive will perform. However, number 2, the larger the block size, the longer it could take to pause your archiving process if you need to stop it for any reason. So note when you're archiving payables or receivables, the tool needs to complete the current block of customers or vendors it's archiving before that process can be paused. Let's go back into our archive window here though. Now, a couple more options from this window. We have the option to transfer master data. And master data would be anything under the cards or settings used in GP. And that includes address IDs, shipping methods, tax detail, really that core customer vendor information. So you will transfer the master data the first time you do the archive. And then once it's been copied across, we understand that this information isn't changing nearly as often as your transactional data. So rather than copying it across every time you archive, it's optional to save you time. Now underneath that, we have the option to transfer user-defined tables. So if you have anything that you want copied across that isn't a part of the core GP tables, you can use this option that allows you to enter the exact SQL table name. So if you click into this expansion arrow, you can enter tables one by one, or you can use asterisks that act as wildcard fields. So all the tables in your live company that begin with these characters will copy into the archive for you. Note there are two restrictions with this option though. First, it is not date specific. Regardless of the cutoff date that you entered for your archive, it will copy everything in the table. And then the other restriction is that it does not delete anything from the live company. It just copies it into the archive company. So keep those in mind. A lot of times we're not seeing huge amounts of data in your customers' third-party tables, so generally our customers aren't too worried about that. So then you click Process. It's going to remind you to do your backup process in case anything happens with the system. It's going to enable that pause and resume button here once that archive starts. And then below this pause and resume button, it's going to give you an estimated time remaining and how many blocks of customers or vendors have been archived. Then there is a history log here, so if you click into this destination company, this keeps track of all the past archives that you ran. So you can see when your archive started, when it completed, and the duration of that archive. And then it's also going to show you which modules and other options you selected for that archive. Do note you will need System Administrator or DYNE SA rights to perform an archive. This Details button here at the bottom, this is going to give you details of the number of records that were transferred or removed during that archive as well. Now the last window I want to show you here makes more sense to show you from my live company. So bear with me for a moment while I change into my live company. So we built in some cross-company inquiry windows for the payables and receivables. These are useful for locating documents when the user does not know if it's in the live company or if it's in the archive company. So to see that, you go up here to your top menu, you click on Inquiry, Sales, and Transaction by Customer. So this is a standard core GP receivables transaction window. This additional drop-down window here at the top, it gives you the option for the inquiry that includes all the archived documents. Now you can see these windows look almost exactly the same. It's going to show you your work, your open and history, and then as well as your archives documents. The user just needs to select the archive company ID so it knows which company to look into. So you can see here we have our archive company and our live company. So that being said, that's the general idea of how Company Data Archive works. At this time, we can take any questions.
Thanks, Griffin. I don't have any questions at the moment, but we will stay on here for a little bit longer. If you happen to have any questions, please feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar interface now. Or if you come up with any questions later, you can contact us. All our contact information is at the top of the screen, or your account executive.